Good morning and welcome all to our press conference, All Eyes on COP30, Why It is Crucial to Tackle Food Systems, organized by ProVeg International and ProVeg Brazil. Two of our speakers are a bit late. We're sorry about that, but they're coming. So we'll start with Aline Varoni, Country Director of ProVeg Brazil.
Hello, good morning, everyone. We invited you for this press conference in here because we think it's crucial for us to tackle like the elephant in the room. In Brazil, there are lots of issues related to deforestation and cattle ranching. And when the choice of Belém to host the next COP was announced, we thought it was very symbolic to host the next COP in an Amazonian city because Amazonia is an ecosystem that is deeply impacted by animal agriculture and agriculture in general. And we believe that this is a great opportunity for us to make the next COP the food COP, because food systems and agriculture, and especially animal agriculture, has been impacting so many tropical forests and biodiversity and causing climate change in several countries, notably in the global south. This is why we are taking this as an opportunity to push for the agenda. As the same way that this is the finance COP, we believe it would be crucial for us to make the next COP the food systems COP, so that we could discuss ways of making agriculture more sustainable, discussing diets, and especially plant-rich diets, which are much more sustainable, more fair, and it could create more resilient food systems as well. This would be the first time that foods are put in such a high level in the agenda of the COPs, and we believe that it's in the interest of Brazil to push for that to happen, especially when we consider the emissions linked to agriculture and livestock worldwide. So globally, we have around 26% of food emissions, of greenhouse gas emissions related to the food systems. Of these, more than half is related to livestock. And in Brazil, we reach like an astonishing number, which is more than half of emissions are related to livestock, either for deforestation, for grazing or producing crops, or for enteric fermentation and other emissions, methane emissions related directly to cattle. So this is more like an encouragement to the Brazilian government in the organization of the next COP so that we can effectively tackle food systems for the first time, encouraging changes for more plant-rich diets, in an agriculture that is more sustainable, more resilient, and more fair for farmers and for consumers. Thank you.
While we wait if the two speakers can make it here, we will be opening already for questions, just to be respectful of time. So any comments or questions from the audience are very welcome. It's a very important topic, so any questions? There's a question there.
Niti with Climate Action Network Southeast Asia. The food systems especially the need to transition to plant-based protein seems to be very low profile here. So how do you expect to end, you're saying you want to bring it into the agenda for the next COP30, under which track, and how are you going to raise the profile and build the momentum on, transition to plant-based protein and phasing down of livestock production, industrial livestock production?
Yeah, that's a very good topic. I think there are some key points in which we think are important for us to achieve that. The first one is working in coalitions. I think there are lots of coalitions in Brazil. There's a very fruitful environment, I would say, because we have very strong smallholder agriculture, very strong campesino movement, very strong agroecological movement as well. So all of these movements and all of these organizations are willing to discuss more sustainable food systems. And I think it's crucial that we are able to work together in coalition so that we bring like a strong front, considering the harmful impacts of agriculture, intensive agriculture, and food systems in Brazil. We are also working together with policymakers and people who can actually influence the decisions that the Brazilian government and COP30 organization will do for the COP30, so that this subject is high on the priority of the government and that it's tackled within the NDCs and the plans for climate change mitigation and also adaptation, because also we've been talking a lot about mitigation with the hopes that we can still achieve the goals. But I think it's also time to start thinking more on how we can work on adaptations, because we believe that farmers, especially small farmers, are going to be deeply affected by climate change impacts, so droughts or floods. And this, as we've seen, especially during the COVID, it can create huge impacts for food security in our society. So there are lots of stakeholders involved, and hopefully I'm kind of, the good part of it is that we can find a common ground in this sustainable agriculture topic to come up with a united front to the government, to the organization. Thank you for the question. It was very interesting.
So our two speakers have arrived, thankfully, and they will be having translation, so we will hear from them and then the translation to English. First, we'll hear from Sandra Paula Bonetti, Environment Director of the Brazilian National Confederation of Rural Workers and Family Farmers.
Olá, eu sou Sandra Paula Bonetti, agricultora familiar e representante da Confederação Nacional dos Trabalhadores e Agricultores Familiares do Brasil, e estou na Secretaria de Meio Ambiente da CONTAG.
Hello, this is Sandra Paula Bonetti. Sandra is part of the CONTAG, the National Confederation of Small Farmers Unions, and she also represents the environmental department of this organization, and she is herself a small-scale family farmer.
Nós representamos mais de 10 milhões de agricultores, agricultoras familiares e trabalhadores no campo do Brasil, onde a nossa pauta cada vez mais vem trazendo quanto que a agricultura familiar pode contribuir para a mitigação e para a adaptação, e quanto também nós somos impactados com as mudanças climáticas e necessitamos de políticas públicas específicas para fazer essa transição.
We represent 10,000 small-scale family farmers in Brazil and farmer workers in Brazil, and our political agenda is to work towards mitigation and adaptation, because our families and our farms are being heavily impacted by climate change. So we want public policies to help us address this.
Nós temos muitos problemas estruturantes, de alguma maneira, mas a gente já vem avançando muito com uma série de políticas públicas específicas para a agricultura familiar, e temos uma expectativa muito grande para que na COP30 podemos mostrar cada vez mais o quanto a agricultura familiar brasileira já contribui com a resiliência, o quanto somos resilientes no nosso território, pensando em mostrar quanto que nós, agricultores e agricultoras, podemos ser parte dessa solução climática no Brasil.
we are facing structural problems in Brazil. We are small-scale family farmers. We are facing structural problems in Brazil, but we also have several advances in specific public policies towards us in Brazil. Our expectations for COP30 is that there will be an acknowledgement that we already have a contribution to resilience and to adaptation to climate change, and that we are part of the solution.
Podemos também ressaltar o quanto que a agricultura familiar é responsável pela produção de alimentos no Brasil. Então, não podemos deixar de olhar para as agriculturas, nós que pensamos em produções diversificadas, como a agroecológica. Pensamos também, é importante lembrar que no Brasil temos várias agriculturas e várias pecuárias, ou seja, nós estamos aqui defendendo o quanto que a agricultura familiar e a pecuária familiar pode ser parte dessa solução climática.
It's important to highlight that the small-scale family farming is responsible for a lot of food production in Brazil, and also that we have different and a very diverse scenario of agricultural production in Brazil. We have diverse forms of agriculture, diverse forms of livestock farming, and we small-scale farmers, we are also putting in practice agroecological agriculture and biodiversity-based systems of production. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Nilto Tato, leader of the Congress Environmental Commission. You have some 3 minutes, please.
O Brasil é responsável por cerca de 5% das emissões de gás de efeito estufa. O uso do solo está relacionado em especial à agropecuária, é responsável por cerca de 70% das emissões que o Brasil é responsável. O modelo preponderante da agricultura no Brasil, da grande agricultura, como em boa parte do mundo, que se desenvolveu pós-Segunda Guerra Mundial, Revolução Verde, ela tem boa parte das responsabilidades também do aquecimento global.
In Brazil, we are responsible for 5% of greenhouse gases global emissions. And from this 5% of emissions in Brazil, the agricultural production, agriculture and livestock production is responsible for 70% of Brazilian emissions. We are, in Brazil, the mainstream agricultural model, as in other parts of the country, is the industrial model is the mainstream model. And it grew after the Second World War with the Green Revolution.
E a agricultura no mundo todo, no Brasil não é diferente, necessita de subsídios, de políticas públicas de apoio por parte do Estado. Mas no Brasil, boa parte dos subsídios acabam indo para a agricultura, para a monocultura, a grande agricultura, e não para a agricultura familiar, que é quem é responsável pela produção de mais de 70% do alimento consumido no Brasil.
So, as with most of the world, the agricultural model in Brazil needs to be subsidized and need public policies from the state government. But what happens in Brazil is that most of these subsidies goes to the monocultures and to the industrial model of farming, and not for the small-scale family farming, which is responsible for 70% of the staple food production.
O governo do presidente Lula, conforme Sandra já falou, vem adotando uma série de políticas públicas para valorizar e fortalecer a agricultura familiar, em especial com políticas de compras institucionais para a escola, nas escolas, nas instituições públicas, e também criando políticas específicas de financiamento e de apoio para a agricultura familiar, em especial na perspectiva agroecológica.
The Lula government, the President Lula and his government is putting in place public policies to strengthen this small-scale family farming agriculture in Brazil. And part of this public policy is the state guarantees the buy of small-scale family farming production for the public schools and other public institutions in Brazil. And we are also having more support, financial support specifically for agroecological practices.
Nós vivemos uma contradição onde, dentro do Congresso Nacional, Câmara e Senado, a maior força política organizada e que se constrói maioria é ligado aos setores da agricultura empresarial, da grande agricultura, esta que é insustentável e que é responsável por boa parte das emissões de gases de efeito de estufa que está do Brasil. Mais uma só.
We have a huge contradiction in Brazil because our Congress, the biggest political force in our Congress comes from the industrial, the large scale in agribusiness, which is unsustainable and responsible for most of our emissions.
Por isso que é importante, então, este esforço que está acontecendo no Brasil, mas que também seja encaminhado no âmbito da COP, de tomar decisões planetárias para incentivar a agricultura familiar, a perspectiva agroecológica, a valorização da agrobiodiversidade, da diversidade, para a gente caminhar para uma agricultura de baixo carbono e de produção de alimentação, de alimentos saudáveis.
So it's crucial and it's important this effort from Brazil for this effort to be a global effort towards COP30 to have decisions that support agricultural farming, small-scale family farming with agroecological practices, biodiversity-based farming, and low-carbon farming to healthy production of food.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions, very concise questions and answers as well. Any questions? Raise your hand if you have a question. It's a very important topic and we have just some 5 minutes. The question is there.
Hello. I'm Lala from Blockchain and Climate Institute. I wanted to ask, what are some of the most promising technologies being used to improve global security and sustainability of food chain?
Can you repeat and be closer to the microphone? We couldn't hear.
Sorry. So what are some of the most promising technologies being used to improve global food security and sustainability?
Perhaps I can give part of the answer and then we could split, but really quickly because we don't have a lot of time. I would say that more than technologies, we need public policies to enforce what we already have in Brazil. We already produce a lot of food, and in Brazil especially, I mean, talking about Brazil, but I think it's the case of many countries in the global south, we have food traditions that could be plant-based. For example, we eat rice and beans, and this is an amazing source of nutrition for Brazil. So I would say that, of course, there are some technologies that can be implemented, but I think we should look backwards and see what the indigenous traditions can bring us of knowledge on how to produce food, what the agroforestry and agroecology can also teach us. It's nothing new, it's something that has been done for ages, and also look to our plates, look at what we actually eat, rice, beans, lots of vegetables that we produce, and stick to the traditions that we already have that are sustainable.
No Brasil, a gente tem sistemas, nós da agricultura familiar temos sistemas mais resilientes. A gente tem a produção agroecológica e a gente sempre tem dito, e nas nossas formações em geral, que a gente às vezes cria nomes novos para coisas que tradicionalmente já são feitas. Então, a gente aprendeu com os nossos antepassados, seja desde os povos e comunidades tradicionais, todos os agricultores familiares, a gente já tem produções diferenciadas e a gente não precisa, como a gente diz, reinventar coisas, é só colocar em prática e talvez deixar de ter essa agricultura de escala como se tem no Brasil, infelizmente.
She's saying that the small-scale family farming in Brazil is highly resilient and is already focused on producing in agroecological forms. And they say in CONTAG's educational processes that we are creating new names for our traditional knowledge and for things that are practiced by our ancestors. And we don't need to reinvent new technologies, but to put in practices those ancestral technologies that are resilient.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we do not have much more time, but our team is very open for questions outside of the room, for interviews. It's a very important topic, of course, considering COP30. So, yeah, unfortunately, we do not have more time. Thank you all for coming, and good morning.